So today I will be talking about modeling flexible behavior in autism spectrum disorders. I will not talking about too much about the social learning part, even though that is indeed part of my bigger research interest. So I will structure my presentation, my talk in a little bit 4 parts. So in the very beginning, I will talk a little bit about computational psychiatry. I believe that most of you are very aware of this new field, but I think maybe it's pretty important to just give you a quite short introduction, and then I will go into the more specific study. And so when talking about computational psychiatry or CP, and then there are also many different meanings. So maybe let's say if you're going to a conference and then you ask somebody and then they say, well, what do you study? And then the response perhaps is, well, I study computational psychiatry. But what does that mean? That can have different meanings already. And I will just also try to illustrate there are different aspects or perspectives or layers regarding the meaning or the term computational psychiatry. And then after that, I will go into the more specific study that I will be introducing to you. So then that is about the flexible choice behavior in autism. And then very briefly, I will talk about the package we had when we were trying to build computational models using the MCMC, so Markov chain Monte Carlo hierarchical Bayesian approach. But that is only the very short part, and then there will be the so-called summary. Right. So let's just go into the first part. So what is computational psychiatry? So by the way, this talk for today is scheduled to be 1.5 hours, but I don't think I will need that long. And also feel free to stop me at any time if you have further or any questions or comments, or if anything is unclear. So feel free to stop me. And also you can just freely use the chat function to let me know if you don't want to speak out. Right. So what is computational psychiatry? It seems like this is rather new field, and it is also quite rapidly growing. And the aim or the purpose of computational psychiatry is to seek to characterize mental functions, and more importantly, these functions in terms of computations at multiple scales, for example, the brain, the behavior, also genetics, genes. So this is also rapidly growing and highly multidisciplinary. This is pretty new, and maybe we could try to date it back to maybe 2012, and when there was this early review comments or commentary piece of article introducing the field of computational psychiatry. And then since then, it seems like every year there is 1 or 2 review articles about computational psychiatry. I don't want to read the names, but you can just briefly take a look that there are a lot. So even though it is new and fastly growing, and then at the same time, it seems that it's quite tricky to have a definition because of the reason I will be introducing the next. So there are multiple layers and the cultures or flavors of computational psychiatry. But regardless, even though it was kind of new, the first paper was 2012, but we could even try to go back a little bit more to find out what is perhaps the first idea, if not yet the first definition of computational psychiatry. So it's really could be dated back to like early 50s or 40s. So when there was a book about cybernetics, and quite importantly here, there is a quote from the book. It says that this distinction between function and organic disorders is illustrated, illuminated by the consideration of the computing machine. So it's more or less already alluring this idea of using the concepts or the principles of computations to understand function and also dysfunctions, as I said to you on the previous slides. Right, and then so since then, since 2012, and then there was quite a few papers and studies and review papers regarding computational psychiatry, and then in this year 2016, in the one of the issue of the journal Nature Neuroscience, I believe. So then there was an entire issue, not really a special issue, but an entire issue more or less dedicated to computational psychiatry. And this paper was cited quite a lot since then. And at the same time, there are multiple books and books, textbooks and articles, a collection of research articles. They're also trying to, all of them are trying to be introducing and advancing the idea of computational psychiatry. And here just to list a few of them. And maybe many of you have already heard about, there are like, well, for one, computational psychiatry is new, and then for two, it's kind of multidisciplinary, and which then means that it requires knowledge and skills from multiple fields, not only like mathematics and medicine, and also psychiatry, psychology, neuroscience, and modeling, and computer science, perhaps, right? We could all agree that no single person in the world nowadays can really master all of the subfields, and it requires a lot of collaboration, and also it requires a lot of, well, further education, let's put that this way. So how to, let's say, educate or teach people computational psychiatry, and then a few places, a few research centers, they also realized this challenge. And then they initialized quite a few courses on computational psychiatry. So two of them are this. So one of this is from London, and the other one is from Zurich in Switzerland. And so because of COVID, honestly, and especially this one, they had it online this year and also last year. And if you didn't participate, all of their materials is also online, so you could also take a look. And another kind of pieces of evidence to show that the computational psychiatry is growing is that there is also a dedicated journal. So there is a journal, and the name is Computational Psychiatry. It is also pretty new, and the first issue, I believe, it is 2017. So it's still fewer than 5 years. But it's there, and they accept research articles and review articles on the field of computational psychiatry. And even new, this is, I think, yes, from last year. And we know that there is this journal, right? Biological Psychiatry, Cognitive Neuroscience and Neuroimaging, CNN. And they try to build a new series. So they call that computational psychiatry. And also Quentin, so this is Quentin, if you realize, so he is the first author of the 2016 Nature Neuroscience Review article that's got a lot of citations. And I put a question marker here in the sense that it's growing. There are multiple articles and textbooks, summer schools, and special issues, and there is even a journal. But it seems like there are more review articles than research articles. And it seems like, well, people try to convey the idea that computational psychiatry is important. Let's do this, let's do that. But are there really a lot of empirical research? And the answer is, back then, not too much. And then it's kind of like, well, there's kind of this thing, I think. Yeah, so there's a quite interesting thing on Twitter. So Zhang, and he's a reviewer of eLife, and he's also in the field of computational psychiatry. And he once, 2017, he once came up with something like the Zhang's rule says the number of review articles is way larger than the number of empirical papers. This was back then, 4 years ago. And then people, there's kind of the complementary argument to say that, yeah, we need to do more work and less talking. So let's get more empirical work as opposed to the review articles. And then I will be showing you a lot of the empirical work, and I got involved and we did. Right, and before entering that, I mentioned that there are like different layers or aspects of computational psychiatry, and what are they? So it seems like it is talked about here in this paper, so 2 cultures of computational psychiatry. It is also mentioned by this 2016 Nature Neuroscience review by Quentin. So when we talk about the computational psychiatry, the two main cultures, the one is theory-driven computational psychiatry, and the other one is data-driven. So those are the two cultures: theory-driven versus data-driven. So this is kind of a good illustration, but maybe let me try to unpack you later on. Just to remember, one is theory-driven, the other one is data-driven. It's pretty self-explanatory. And then there's also a recent view from this year, honestly. So they were saying that, well, in addition to the two cultures of CP, theory-driven and data-driven, there can be actually a third culture, which is to embrace the digital era, right? So now everything is like digital, and we want to use mobile apps to just illustrate or to measure a lot of things, like for example, emotion and like mood, and all of everything that can be like kind of a structure in the digital domain. And then they call the third culture like the digital culture. But irrespective of this digital culture, we could try to imagine that, well, if the digital culture can or maybe cannot or may not be a culture in itself, because we could do theory-driven research using the digital data. We could also do data-driven research using the digital data, right? You believe it or not, or just you buy the idea or not, it is there, but maybe it is not so necessary that to put it in isolation, there is a kind of digital thing. But maybe you think that is important, up to you, it's totally up to you. This is just one view of imagining computational psychiatry. But more importantly, let's just talk about theory-driven and data-driven research, or CP. So, so one is the first one, let's say, is theory-driven research or theory-driven computational psychiatry, so which by the name suggests aims to provide a theoretical and mechanistic explanation using computational models. So it provides mechanistic explanation, and also it tries to use generative models to do prediction and also to do classification. So it sounds quite straightforward, theory-driven. There's theory, and based on the theory, you develop some mathematical tools to understand behavior or understand the brain. But you might still wonder what is qualified as a theory-driven research, right? So quite importantly, the first thing to think about is the construct. So what is the computational construct you're interested in? So based on this kind of, there is an RDoC criteria from National Institutes of Mental Health from the US. So they were trying to categorize a few constructs or mental process, if you want to put that way. So reward is a construct, learning is a construct, self-other distinction is a construct, emotion is constructs. So there are basically the research components or research questions that you are interested in. And another important thing is, well, the construct, you have it there, but the modeling is not yet there, right? The theory is not yet illustrated or reflected. So then the next recipe, in addition to construct, is computational modeling, and based on theory. So it is quite crucial to develop computational models in this kind of perspective, and it is quite more and more recognized nowadays in neuroscience and as well as psychology. So the idea here is that people are trying to promote this idea to use formal models and derived from theories, and then to quantify that using mathematical models, and then to understand the brain, understand the behavior. So maybe the next question is perhaps what is then computational modeling? And here, this idea, according to at least the theory-driven approach, so cognition is defined as information processing. And if we learned from computer science, we know if there's a function, and we were trying to map from some input to some output. Well, this is already information processing, right? And here we could use simply the illustration or analogy of this one to understand the brain or behavior. And it turns out that we could like define the inputs to be the individual, so the people, and also the environments. And then those two are the inputs. Through some mapping, then there's the behavior, right? So then this is the computation through input to the output. And this idea is not too new, actually. This is from the 30s when the psychologist Kurt Lewin, and he formalized the behavior, as I said, as a function of the people, the person, and also the environments. But this is a rather simplified model. This model doesn't really tell us anything, but it is a kind of a conceptual and highly condensed version to try to decompose what is behavior, right? Behavior is kind of a function of the person itself and also the environment from outside, or internal, external, if you want, if you may. Right, and then the next one is the second culture is the data-driven, and it is quite helpful to understand the diagnostics and treatment responses and identify some subgroups using some machine learning approaches, for example. And another example is speech analysis. So people could record the speech and then using some algorithm to understand if there is a difference between healthy and also the disease in terms of their behavior, language generation, the patterns of phrases and the grammars, for instance. And here what I show is to use machine learning approaches to identify subgroups. So let's say there's a population, and in the gray color, those are the healthy people, and in colors, those are some diseases, for example, the autism. But supposedly they are subgroup, but they have some like different properties or features or symptoms or like reasons, the underpinnings. But through traditional understanding, there's not so much of a difference in terms of the control and also the autism. But if there is a way to identify to classify the subgroups, and then there is a clear difference that the control is maybe not so much different than the first autism subgroup, but then the second autism subgroup is like smaller, and then the third one is larger than the control group, or whatever this shows. It doesn't really matter, just to show that it's quite important to know the subgroups, because in mental diseases, for instance, autism, there is a high heterogeneity. So there is a huge variety. Not all autistic individuals are the same. There might be some critical subgroups, and then those might be classified by machine learning approaches. Right, and then computational psychiatry is getting more and more important, and then the funding agencies, they really recognize this challenge and this paradigm shift. So both in the United States and also in Europe, there are some like funding schemes. They really highly support research of using computational approaches to understand mental health, irrespective of the cultures I talked about. So they support both theory-driven research and also data-driven research. Are there any questions? It's kind of quite generic introduction about computational psychiatry. Everything's okay? All right, good. So then I will move on to a specific study and an empirical study regarding the flexible choice behavior in autism and also in health participants to serve as a control group. And this work was already published last year. And in case you're interested, after my talk, and you can still check it out. So in autism, and we know that there are like many symptoms, and there are two core symptoms. One is the social deficits, social communication deficits, and the other one, the other one is restricted and repetitive behavior or behavioral rigidity. And this one is the core symptom that we focused on during this study. So the behavioral rigidity is likely to be underpinned by cognitive flexibility, or maybe cognitive inflexibility, because there is the inflexibility in terms of the behavior. And then there is the reflected behavioral rigidity or repetitive restricted behavior. And this data I will be showing you here, they come from a large cohort of studies. So the large cohort, I will tell you a little bit about that. I will tell you a little bit more later, but more or less the idea is that during multiple sessions, test sessions, there are multiple centers in Europe. And then so we invite a lot of participants, both healthy control, healthy individuals and autistic individuals. So they will undergo a lot of tests, like behavioral testing, first recruitment and screening, and some consent. Those got all of these details, some questionnaire, and then, for instance, there's cognitive tasks, behavioral tasks. Though this is the one that I will be talking about, and then there can also be, for instance, like brain scans, resting state, and those blood samples, a lot of this stuff. And I will be showing you only one of them, which is coming from a behavioral testing. And so why we were interested in, why one of the focus of the big cohort is cognitive flexibility. It is because the capacity of employing flexible choice behavior is quite important to everyday life. And cognitive flexibility, as I mentioned, and this one is thought or believed to be developing through different age groups, from childhood through adolescence and into adulthood. And the impairments in cognitive flexibility, or let's say cognitive inflexibility, could be suggested to underpin this repetitive and restricted behavior in autistic individuals. And so how to study cognitive flexibility. So one of the experimental approach is to employ the reversal learning tasks. I will be showing you the task later, but one of these approaches is to use the reversal learning paradigm. And then especially, well, the use of the reversal learning task, the task is there, but there are different groups of people using this task, and then their way, their approach to analyze the behavioral features of the reversal learning task is a little bit different. So for people who really study learning and decision making, they already started using computational models a lot, like 20 years ago already. But for this more clinically focused research groups, they know there's the reversal learning task, that they use it, but their way to analyze the data is a little bit differently than people who are focusing learning and decision making. So the more traditional way to analyze the reversal learning task is basically to use summary statistics and average the behavior to reflect the difference in terms of the developmental trajectory, or maybe also in terms of the group difference between healthy and also between healthy and autistic. So one of these summary statistics could be just the percentage of win stay, right? So win stay is a strategy, and lose shift is also a strategy. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I will just show you the example later. But the idea is there are two kind of approaches to analyze the same task. One is a little bit more classic, more traditional. The other one is more computational, let's say. And then let's say, well, people would love to move or shift from the more classic approach of analyzing the data to a more computational perspective. And then so computational perspective is more important for us to understand the trial by trial variance, in addition to only the average statistics. So then there's only one number, which doesn't really say much. But if we could be able to go into the trial by trial changes and trial by trial computational signals, then that is more important and interesting to see the more nuanced difference between health and disease. So then through this background, you could already try to understand what we were trying to do. So we basically want to investigate flexible choice behavior in the probabilistic reversal learning task in healthy individuals versus autistic individuals. At the same time, because this is a large cohort and there are individuals from different age groups, children, adolescents, and adults, so we were able to examine the learning strategies and the potential developmental trajectory using computational models. And also in addition to the more classic summary statistics. At the same time, because this is a large cohort, there are multiple measures irrespective of the tasks. There are some questionnaires or measurements of this repetitive restricted behavior, and also maybe anxiety, and also this associated ADHD symptomatology in the ASD individuals. Right. So I talked a few times that we were focusing on the reversal learning task and how that can be important to measure cognitive flexibility or cognitive inflexibility. And I believe that most of you know what a reversal learning task is, but I will just also briefly talk to you through the task design that we had. So we have a rather simple reversal learning task. And this is basically, first of all, a two-choice reward learning task. So on each trial, there will be two choice options showing to the participants. And one of them, the reward probability is higher. The other one, the reward probability is lower. For example, 75-25. And on average, if the participant is choosing the better option, meaning the high reward option, then on average, they will get 70% of the time a reward and 25% of the time a punishment. And the other one is the worst. So if you choose this one, you get more punishment than reward. And actually, because we are using like clinical patients and 75 or 75-25, 70-30 might be a little difficult. So we decided on some easier tasks. So 80-20, 80-20, those are the reward probability. And this is the acquisition phase. And afterwards, we do not tell the participants when the reversal will happen. But then there is a time point the reversal happens. So then the better choice option became the worst one, and then the worst choice option became the better one. And then here is the kind of the outcome contingency. So at the very beginning, the first half of the trials, the yellow one is better. So if you choose yellow, you get more reward and punishment. And if you choose the blue, you get the opposites. And then after the reversal, the better one became worse and the worse one became better, as I said. And we had 80 trials, and then the reversal happened like midway in the middle of the trials. This is rather simple. There's only one reversal, one time, but still we didn't tell participants when this reversal will happen. And we also didn't tell the participants how many reversal there were. So even though there's only once, it's rather simple, but we just when during the instruction, we try to keep everything as vague as possible. So we did not want the participants to know the exact design that we have. Otherwise, it's too simple and they will find out rather easily. And how that can be related to cognitive flexibility is like, and let's focus on here, the first half of the design. So let's say, if you choose this one, if you choose yellow, even though this is the better option, but quite occasionally you will still get a probabilistic punishment by choosing that, right? So if you choose this 80% of the time, you get a win, and 20% of the time you get a loss. But because through learning, you will find out that most of the time, the yellow one will give you a reward, and very rarely and occasionally it will get you a punishment. So you will be realizing that this is a rare outcome. And through learning, this should be ignored, because even though you get a negative outcome by choosing the yellow, you should say, well, this is because of chance, because of probability. The next round, I will still choose yellow because I know it is a better option. But after the reversal, we could imagine that, well, the frequency to get negative outcomes by choosing the yellow option is getting more and more. So at a point, if I choose yellow, I see a negative outcome. If I choose yellow, I see a negative outcome. I would just doubt myself. I would ask myself, would it be possible that there is a change already? So the negative outcome associated with the yellow option is not probabilistic. It might become a signal to inform me that there might be a change and I should choose the opposites. right? So it's kind of, this is the noise in the reversal phase, and here the noise became a signal so that it will teach me to be sensitive to pick up the reversal during the trial. And this is a quite important phase or duration or time window to look at how much the participants are still choosing the previously better one. So if you are flexible enough, you see a lot of negative outcomes by choosing yellow, you will soon realize that this is perhaps a signal of a reversal, then you change your strategy, right? But if you stack, you might think, okay, I know that yellow is better in the acquisition phase. Even though that I see negative feedback, loss, I might think, no, this is chance, whatever, I will choose it. This is kind of inflexibility. This is kind of a stacking behavior where they don't understand there's a change. So this is an important part to our analysis. Right, good. Any questions? Yeah, please.
Maybe you will mention this later, but just to be clear for me, what is the feedback? Correct and incorrect is the feedback, or one plus one minus one is the feedback?
Yeah, right. So the exact feedback is smiley, so happy face and sad face. Because for children, they might not really understand so much monetary reward. So we use kind of more generic emotion feedbacks, sad and happy faces, smiley, in a cartoon-ish illustration. And during the and then during the modeling, we coded at 1 and -1. Yeah, great. And so through this here the background, and also through kind of this kind of introduction of the task, and you might already realize that what can be a computational candidate or computational focus to quantify the data or quantify the structure. So we looked into the literature, and then we know that there is the kind of the reinforcement learning or this Wagner value updates. So this is the feedback-driven learning. So when when individuals see a positive feedback, and then they are more likely to repeat it and to see if that one can give us a reward in the long run. And if you see a punishment, and then the punishment will also teach you so that maybe you reduce your probability to choose that option, right? And so here, the idea, we could say that, well, those are the individual, those are the two choice options. One is the blue one is the yellow one, and we turned into the simple Risk-Wagner model. So there's the value updated from the learning rates weighted reward prediction error, if you know that. So the prediction error is calculated where the difference between the actual reward and the previous value. So they basically use this prediction error signal, the difference between what you actually get and what you expect you will get. So the difference of that, this one is multiplied by a weight parameter determining how much of the prediction error is used to update the value signal. Okay, so all of our candidate models are based on this, even though this is the simplest one, and this one didn't even win any model comparison, but all of our other models are based on this one. So those are the variants of the simple Risk-Wagner model. And here there's a little bit more information about the data set. So as I said already, this is a large cohort, and this is the baseline cohort of a longitudinal data, so the LEAP data set. The data come from multiple sites, from England, from the Netherlands, Italy, and also Germany. And we had above 300 ASD individuals and above 250 healthy individuals, typical developing, and categorized by the age groups. So we have children, adolescents, and adults. So in total, this is a fairly large number of individuals, especially in Europe, and this is a good number to be sensible enough to test any statistical difference. And just very important to mention that Daisy Crowley, and this is the co-first author of the paper, and she really did a lot of work initially to analyze the data. Right, so let's look at the behavior a little bit. Those are the reversal structures I mentioned to you already. So acquisition phase, reversal phase. And during the reversal phase, better became worse and worse became better. And this is the overall, entirely overall data, irrespective of children, adolescents, and adults, and irrespective of autism versus the healthy control, just everyone in the experiments, 500 something participants. So this is the like the ground truth, right? In the beginning, yellow one is better, and then the other one is better. And we were trying to anticipate that maybe this will also be the trajectory of data from real participants. And here is what we see actually. So in the beginning, the participants, they really learned very well that the yellow one is better. So they really acquired this knowledge during the acquisition phase. And then during the reversal phase, and they slowly find out that, so here is kind of the stage, they try to understand if there's a reversal or maybe not. And then after that, after they have picked up the change in the environment, then they also stick with the blue option, because they now established the new association between the blue and also between the outcome, between the blue and the associated outcome. And the entire overall behavior maybe is not so much interesting, even though I want to show you the task works. So the previous slide is basically to show you the task works. On average, irrespective of age, irrespective of the diagnostic group, the individuals understand the task. They know what is better, and they know after change what the other one is the better. And maybe then let's decompose the data into the age groups and also into the diagnostic groups. So first we calculated is the choice accuracy. So meaning that how often they choose the more rewarding option. So how often they choose yellow in the first half, together with how often they choose blue in the second half. So this is how we define choice accuracy. And what we see is that the choice accuracy of the TD, the healthy group, is consistently higher than the ASD group. So irrespective of age, the healthy control, they behave better than the ASD counterparts. And then there is also slight increase as a function of age, because as they grow up, they understand the probabilistic structure better. So their behavior is also increasing as they grow. And another behavioral index is we call a preservative error. So the preservative error is calculated after reversal. Essentially, how often I still choose the previously better option, even though I receive constant negative feedback. So let me put it another way. So in the reversal phase, assuming that I already know the yellow one is better, but I might still choose yellow, even though I receive maybe 2 or 3 consecutive negative feedback, because I believe, well, the yellow one is better, I know it. I see negative feedback, I wonder that might still be chance, probabilistic, so I still choose it. This is determined or defined as a preservative error. It essentially gets stuck, right? So you could guess what the behavior will look like. Across the age groups, we see that the preservative error is higher in the autistic group relative to the healthy control. So basically, it's quite aligned with our hypothesis that the ASD individuals, they get more stuck. They are a little bit less flexible after reversal. They basically make more errors. And so putting this together, we could imagine that these behavioral indices, healthy behavioral indices of choice accuracy and preservative errors, so they suggest that there is a less optimal learning performance in the ASD group relative to the TD individuals, the healthy individuals. So recall that we are trying to use theory-driven computational models to understand the behavioral differences in ASD and in TD. So then we turned into computational modeling. And so the baseline model is the simple risk log. And we derived a few more models on top of, or in addition to the risk-Clavagna. So one variant is that assuming, so there's a simple risk-Clavagna model, it only updates the value of the chosen option. So if you choose yellow, then you get a reward, positive reward, then the value of the chosen option, so the yellow one, will be increased. And then if in this case, the blue one is not chosen, it's unchosen. And then the value of the blue option stays the same. Okay, this is the assumption of the simple risk-Clavagna. But then but then you might have another assumption that, well, if I know I choose yellow, I get a reward, I will also try to guess that if I would have chosen blue, then I would have gotten a negative, right? So because there is anti-correlated structure, one is giving me reward, the other one must be giving me a loss or a punishment. So this is how the task works. So because of this assumption, we came up with another model, not really we came up with, but there is a long history regarding how this model was developed. So this is a counterfactual updates. So both the chosen option and the unchosen option, the value, they are updated. But the other one, because it didn't choose it, it is called a counterfactual value update. You are updating this value as if you would have chosen it, even though it didn't choose in reality. Double update or counterfactual updates. Another variant is the reward punishment model. So this is quite important for adolescents. So because there is a huge literature in developmental science or developmental neuroscience suggesting that, especially in teenagers and adolescents, so those individuals are specifically more sensitive to punishment, to negative reward than to positive reward. So imagine during your childhood, high school-ish, and if you behave, if you behave pretty well, and then whoever tells you that you are doing very well, doing very good, you feel happy, yes. But then if someone tells you that, no, what you're doing is not right, you might be pretty angry, because there is a period of time in our life that we are super sensitive to negative outcomes. We just don't like to hear negative comments during that period of time. And this is how the reward punishment model is based on. So there are two learning rates. One is to quantify the value update of the positive reward, and the other one is to quantify the value update of negative reward or negative prediction error. And then there's a third model, we call it, but we just borrow this model from behavioral economics. So that is called a experience weighted attraction model. It sounds a bit complicated, but the rough idea is that, so we carry our experience through learning, right? So if there is a learning, and then we also have some memory. We memorize what had happened in the past. And then we want to carry maybe a fraction of this memory through trials. So if I rely a lot more on what I learned in the past, maybe I will get stuck more often, because my entire past experience in the acquisition phase tells me that the yellow option is better. And then I believe my experience. And then after the reversal, I will get stuck a lot. But if I'm flexible, I do carry some fractions of my experience in the past, but I will also be open to new observations in the experiments, and then perhaps more flexible to incorporate the changes in outcome contingency, right? So this is the rough idea. Right, so then we have these three candidate models. So the simple risk-Clavagna model, we didn't show it because it is constantly the worst one as kind of as a baseline. Yeah, there's a question. Yeah, please. There's a hand raising.
Thank you. Could you please explain the counterfactual update again? I didn't quite get why we use this this model in the first place. You mentioned that because we want to update the value of the B options. I understand right, or I'm wrong here?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so let's say, Okay, good. So let's say we have two choice options. One is a square, the other one is a circle. And then let's say on this trial, and if I choose this one, I get a reward. even though I didn't choose this one, I know that if I would have chosen it, I will get a punishment. So this is how the task works. On one trial, only one option can give us a positive reward. Okay. So the simple risk Wagner only updates the chosen value. So if I choose square, if I get a positive reward, then the value of that one will be increased through the value update rule. And then the value of this one will stay the same, so will stay constant, so assuming the risk Wagner. But if there is the knowledge, our part of knowledge is how the anti-correlated structure works. If I choose this, I get positive. If I would have chosen this, I would get a negative outcome. So then in this case, it could be that the value of this is decreasing if you do the counterfactual update, double update, right? It's kind of one goes down, the other one goes down. One goes up, the other one goes down for the counterfactual update model.
Thank you. I understand. Yes, I understand. Thanks.
Oh yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you. Right. So we have these three models. Remember those colors. And so we looked at the model comparison in different age groups. And it turns out that in the children group, the counterfactual update model is the best. So here the size of this bar shows the best model. And for children, the counterfactual model is the best. And we see there is a change through age. So for adolescents group, the green one, the reward punishment model is the best one. And this is quite in line with the idea I told you. So during the period of adolescence, puberty, individuals are quite sensitive to punishment relative to reward. And then the reward punishment model is indeed the winning model for that adolescence group. And this adults group, when they are growing, and then the experience weighted attraction model is the best. So through also my verbal explanation of the EWA model, it is also quite a little bit complex and sophisticated, and only adults are able to employ the strategy that is entailed from EWA model. So two observations here. We see that the winning model in the same age group is the same. So either it is healthy control or it's ASD. The winning model of children is always they are both the CU, the counterfactual updates. Doesn't matter TD or ASD. The winning model of the adolescents is the reward punishment, and here the same TD or ASD. The winning model for ASD is also the EWA. So irrespective of the diagnostic group, the winning model per age group is the same. Okay. Another observation is through age, then there is a difference, right? There is a difference in terms of the winning model. So those are the observations. But what does it tell us, right? This didn't even say too much about the mechanistic understanding in terms of behavior. So we know that, let's say, the counterfactual update model, that is the winning model for the children group. And then we try to compare the differences in terms of their learning rates. And we see that, so here is the children, and this is the learning rates parameter. And we found that the learning rate of the ASD individuals, it is higher than the learning rates of the TD individuals. And well, this seems interesting. And the learning rate, usually we understand that as a kind of a speed of learning, right? If the learning rate is high, well, then the speed of integrating past experience is larger or higher. If the learning rate is low, then the speed of integrating past experience is smaller. And we might wonder that, well, if the learning rate reflects the speed of learning, shouldn't it be already better that to have a learning rate, to have a larger learning rates? But here it seems like the larger learning rates in ASD, and remember that when I show you the accuracy, when I show you the preservative error, that ASD individuals, they are behaving worse than the healthy control, right? So how to make the connection that the worse learning performance is connected with a larger learning rate? And this is something that we try to understand. So it turns out, is there a question? No, yeah. So it turns out that the best way to understand this is to run a simulation. So we basically run simulation for our task design. So 80 trials, 40 for acquisition and another 40 for reversal. And through the same learning environment, we could be able to try to find out or to identify what the optimal learning rate is. So the simulation basically works like this. We take every single learning rate in between 0 and 1, because that is the range of the definition. We take every single learner rates between 0 and 1, and then we calculate or simulate data, and then to calculate what could be the simulated choice accuracy. And we found out that this is the optimal learning rate. So when the learning rates is, I don't know, this around 0.20, 0.19, 0.18-ish. So this is the optimal learning rates, and this will give us the highest performance through simulation. And once we identified the optimal learning rates through simulation, we could then locate our empirical parameters of ASD and TD in addition or with respect to the optimal learning rates. And what we found is like the TD learning rates, even though in terms of magnitude, it is lower, yes, but it is much closer to the optimal learning rates. And then the ASD learning rate, it is a little bit further than the optimal learning rate. And this is actually in line with our behavioral finding, right? So the ASD, they perform worse, and the TD, they perform better. And this is reflected from the difference in learning rates. You can't really see it here, right? So large is large, small is small. What does that tell us? We need to know about what can be the optimal, and then we compare or we locate them with the respect to the optimal learner rate. And that is a much appropriate way to understand the difference. So yeah, this one I think I can skip. And we also have the learning rates differences in the adolescents group and also in the adults group. And for the reason of time, I don't want to show you too much of the details, but roughly they follow the same idea. So we do the simulation, we could be able to identify the optimal, and here the optimal of the reward punishment model for the adolescents group. And here, this is the optimal parameter for the experience weighted attraction model for the adults group. So both of these optimal learning parameter in relation to their empirical learning rates parameters, they could be related to the worst learning performance, accuracy, and preservative error in between ASD and TD. Okay. If you don't trust me, you can look at it like in detail later, but roughly this is the idea. So there is the optimal, and find it out where the actual empirical parameters is, and it's always that the TD is worse than the ASD, and this is in line with our behavioral finding. Right, and because this is kind of computational psychiatry research, and we also had quite a few clinical measurements. So one of them is the anxiety, and also some questionnaires, repetitive restricted behavior, and they are related to some of the learning parameters, particularly like in the adolescents group, we found more significant results. But here, this result, I guess, should be treated with a little bit caution, because I guess this is significant because we have a relatively larger sample size, and this is quite important to do future research to identify or to replicate if that really holds, rather than our sample here. So it's more important to test and test again to find out if this is stable. Right, so to conclude a little bit, and we had this composite score, for instance, this bin stay and choice accuracy, and also the preservative error. So this behavioral data analysis show that there is a cognitive flexibility is impaired in the ASD adolescents, and also in children, and also in adults. So the learning performance is worse in ASD relative to the TD. And we have the comparison of three learning models. It supports the idea that the different models were superior in ASD and TD, but they're identical in the same age group, okay? And we have this learning preference changes between the age groups. So for the adolescents, it's the reward punishment. For children, it's CU, counterfactual updates, and for the adults, that is experience-weighted attraction model. And there is also some correlation between clinical measurement and also the learning parameters. Right. Some more questions, maybe, before I go to the next small topic. All right, doesn't seem the case. So the next small section is about the package. Let's just switch gear to talk about a little bit different topic. So for all of our computational models, I mentioned to you, we used a hierarchical Bayesian approach. So then it's kind of quite tricky for especially beginners to use MCMC, so Markov chain Monte Carlo. So this is from another study of mine. This is really the social learning part. This is the model. This is the conceptual one. There's a lot of kind of connections and errors, so on and so forth. And this is equivalent to those few lines and equations. And if you code it in the STEM language to implement Markov chain Monte Carlo MCMC in the Bayesian framework, this is the entire length of the model. It doesn't really seem so straightforward, right? Especially for beginners. But we would really encourage people to embrace the idea of computational modeling using the hierarchical Bayesian approach. So to lower the barrier of using it, what to do? Well, we develop a package. So the H-based TM package is in collaboration with Zhang and Nate. So we were basically trying to code all of the popular computational models in reward learning, decision-making, reinforcement learning field. So the risk-Lagna, it's implemented there, and the CU, the reward punishment, the experience-weighted attraction models, so all of the models I mentioned to you, they are already implemented in the package. And if you heard about the distinction between model-based learning versus model-free learning, so the two-step task, and this is implemented and also applied a lot in the literature. That model is also implemented in the package. Or maybe if you are interested in analyzing reaction times, response speed. So maybe you heard about sequential sampling model, drift diffusion model, right? And those model, at least the simple variants of the DDM, that is also implemented in the package. So I'm really encourage you to take a look if this might be something that you're up for in your own research. Right. So this is the summary that's then approaching to the end of this talk. Recall what I talked about today. So I first introduced you the field, the new and rapidly growing field of computational psychiatry. So it's emerging and interesting field for us to understand the function and also dysfunction in terms of computation and to understand mental disorders through different layers, brain, and I showed you the example of looking at behavior, but there are also aspects or examples or evidence showing you the computational differences in terms of neural data, the brain, and also genetic data, the genes. So just embrace this opportunity. And when talking about computational psychiatry, that might entail multiple flavors, multiple layers, or perspectives. So one is the theory-driven, using mathematical models from the theory to understand the quantified behavior. The other one is data-driven, to use mostly machine learning approaches to find out, classify the subgroups in the highly heterogeneous clinical group. It's possible also to combine both the theory-driven and a data-driven approach in your work. And from the work I showed you, we have the ASD group that is with the 3 age groups, children, adolescents, and adults. So developmental perspective is quite important in the CP research, because it is quite important to identify the changes in computation through age. And a practical remark is that, so I showed you that the worst performance in ASD relative to TD is related to a higher learning rate, but higher in that case means a little bit more away from the optimal learning rates, right? This is quite important. So a practical remark is that computational differences needs to be corroborated by the effects in behavior. You try to connect what you find in modeling with what you find in behavior. Right, so those are what I'm trying to say, and I hope that I've convinced you CP research interesting. Developmental perspective is also quite inspiring, and it's quite important to connect the difference in behavior with the difference in computations. And here I'd like to thank all of my collaborators and some funding sources. And more importantly, thank you all for your attention. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
Many thanks, Lei, for your great presentation. It was very interesting.
Thank you.
Everyone, any questions?
Yep, yeah, please.
Zahra, please.
Thank you for great presentation. I have a general question about computational modeling between autism behavior and typical development behavior that you did. As you said, when you want to model this behavior, you have one discrete view between typical development and autism. I think because, as you said, autism is a spectral disorder. We need a fuzzy view to model between typical development and autism, not a discrete view. What do you think? Is there any model to do like a fuzzy view between typical and autism, typical development and autism, or not? Thank you.
Yeah, right. Thanks for the question. It's a good point. So we didn't do that. I think your question is related to perhaps there's some subgroups in the autistic individuals, right? We say, well, there's children, adolescents, and adults, but what if within children, within adolescents, and within adulthood, there are some possible subgroups? Yes, so the data sample size is not large enough to allow for this kind of analysis. So one attempt, we didn't try that, one attempt is perhaps use the parameters estimated from the model. So in the children group, we have the learner rate parameters. So maybe use these learner rate parameters to do, for instance, a simple k-means clustering to find out perhaps there are some subgroups, and then to see if there is any also difference in relation to, sorry, in relation to the healthy control. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. I mean that every person is not only, we cannot say that one person is typical development or autism. Every person is between these two. We say,
okay, I see. So the classification or the labeling to say, well, who is healthy control, who is autism, is based on the knowledge of clinicians. So if you remember one of the earlier slides, so we recruit, and then there's screening and also some assessment. Those are done by clinicians. So they use their questionnaire, DSM, for example, to evaluate if they can be diagnosed to be healthy or autistic. And then if you don't trust their diagnostics, there's another story. So if you say, well, I don't trust those clinicians, then there can be another approach to say, well, it's in between, and then let's see what can be done.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good point, honestly. Yeah.
Okay, we have another question here. Arash, please ask.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for the presentation. It was a very interesting topic. I really enjoyed it. I have a question. It's a more general question. In fact, you implemented three kind of reinforcement learning models and use them on the different age groups. And as we saw in the shapes, each group has a model that fitted best for them. I mean, for each age group, we have a winner model. I want to ask, it's just an opinion in my mind, that if we can trace back the difference in the models and trace back the difference in the models and go to and find out why this difference of fits happened in the first place, and get back to the theory and kind of evaluate which theory is better and find a better intuition about the autism itself. I hope I convey my question well. I don't know how.
I'm sorry, could you maybe repeat
was it clear?
The last part of your question? What was that? Sorry.
Let me say it in this way. We have three models, and they fitted on three different groups. We fit them on the three different groups. For example, if I remember correctly, the CU model is best fitted for the children's, but it wasn't very good. It didn't have a very good fit on adults. I want to ask if we are able to trace back the difference in the model itself. I mean, what's the difference between CU model and EWA model, and trace back this difference to the theoretical basis and find out if this difference in models actually says a difference in children and adults in the theoretical level. I mean, the theory behind these models explain the difference between children and adults in autistic groups.
Okay, now I see. So the difference, there are two aspects of this question. First of all is if we can find out the difference in terms of the model. This is simply, yes, what you can see is here, the size of the bar is already showing the difference of the model, yes. Right? So what you could imagine is 90-ish kind of participants, their data, children, their data can be best explained by the counterfactual updates, but there is also a fraction of participants, their best model is the reward punishment, even though we are doing the average, but there is a small fraction of participants, their data is RP, okay? And this is the same for, well, this maybe the evidence is quite strong. So mostly we see the RP model for the adolescents and here the EWA for the adults. Yeah, so those are the difference. So, and the second aspect of answering your question actually goes to how can we try to connect the model fit to the actual behavior. So then here, this requires what we do, what we call a posterior predictive check. So here, this line, those are the real data. So those are the behavioral pattern. So first of all, choosing yellow and then choosing blue after reversal. So for ASD and TD. And then the data with these shaded bars, with the shaded areas, those are coming from the model. So here, what I show you, these waves or small waves patterns, they are from the counterfactual update model. And if you, regardless of the model comparison, you anyway will use the simulation from the RP model for the children group, you will see the closeness between the actual data and then the fits will be a little bit larger. So you would say that the RP model is fitting worse relative to the CU.
Thank you very much. I understood. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thank you.
Amir, please ask your question.
Thank you very much for your nice presentation. I have multiple questions. If there are no questions, I can go ahead. So my first question is that did you consider reaction time in your analysis? Or did did you record the reaction time?
Yes. So yeah, this is quite an interesting question. In the instruction, because they are children, maybe they will really take quite some time to understand what they are supposed to do, right? So we do record reaction time, but during the instruction, we didn't say, well, please respond as fast as possible. We didn't say. So we essentially give the participants an indefinite infinite amount of time for them to respond. Until they respond, they can move to the next trial. Otherwise, they will just wait to find out what to do, right? Yeah, so we have the RT data, but because of this instruction, analyzing the RT data does not make sense, especially during the first maybe 10 trials. It's tremendously longer because especially for younger kids, let's say, they really need to understand what they're supposed to do. There's the keyboard they have to press, and then they see the smiley face, whatever mean, and then moving to the next, they find out. For adolescents and adults, the reaction time that makes better sense, yes, but still where we didn't analyze that. We just try to keep everything consistent. If we didn't analyze children, then we also didn't analyze adolescents and adults. But perhaps we should. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, yeah, because there are some other types of model that, for example, reinforcement learning sequential sampling model, which considers reinforcement learning besides decision making, and you can analyze both reaction time and accuracy. I put a link on the chat for who wants to be familiar with this model.
Yes. Yeah. So actually, we have a different projects studying like prosocial behavior and under the testosterone, like one of the hormones. So because they're healthy adolescents, and we just apply the testosterone cream and also just placebo. And there we actually use this what you are saying, combined reinforcement learning together with sequential sampling to try to find out the difference both in choice and also in reaction time. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah, thank you. The other my other question is about the three parameters of the model. I didn't understand actually the three parameters of the model. Could you please explain it more?
Yes, if you want to see this. So for the counterfactual updates, this is the learning rates. This is the free parameter. So here it shows to update the chosen one and also the unchosen one. So the opposite, because as if you are choosing the other, then that is opposite counterfactual reward. And then for the RP, essentially there are two separate learning rates, one for the positive and the other one for the negative. And for the experience-rated attractions, this is formulated a little bit differently. So this row, this is the experience decay parameter. So the conceptual illustration I showed you is like how much I still rely on what I learned from my past, what I carried over through my experience. And this experience also decays through time. So this is decay. And this decay is like between 0 and 1, right? And using this decay, so the decay is entered here. So using this decay, I'm updating my value. So the value is updated in accordance to the decay, together with also kind of a learning rate. So this phi here is more or less also learning rates, and also with actual outcome. Yeah. So this is the value updates. And across all of the three models, if you know there's the sigmoid softmax temperature, we also have that. Yeah, we also have that. So that is one additional free parameter, but that is identical across all of the three models here.
Thank you. I have one more general question.
Yeah, sure.
About the HBASDM, because you are one of the member of that project. As you know, PyStan 3 is released, and it does not support Windows anymore. What is your plan
Really?
for the what is your plan for the future of the HBASDM? This is important for me because we have another package based on Stan, and we don't know what should I do.
You said which one doesn't support Windows anymore? Stan?
PyStan 3 does not support Windows anymore.
Ah, okay. I didn't know that. So for the HBASDM, originally it is R package. So everything we had is R. And then because there are like different requests from the users, and then there is also the Python PyStan initiation now. So we didn't use PyMC3 for now. So we used the Stan version in Python. So we used the PyStan. So for us, maybe that doesn't really matter so much. And if you are interested in the future plan of HPSDM, now is like there are like two branches, R and Python, right? R Stan, Python Stan. But the Stan model is the same. So the Riesler-Wagner in Stan is just something .stan with the file extension. And what we are trying to do is basically to include more models. So if you have a model that you think is interesting for the community, but is not yet included in the package, so you can also make your own contribution. So there is a web page to say how to add new models, follow the guidelines, and then you say the pull request, then that can be merged into the main that directory in the GitHub. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure. Great. Thanks for the interest.
Okay, Hania, please.
Do you have my voice?
Yeah.
Thank you. Many thanks for a great presentation. I have two questions. Number is that how did you control the effect of intelligence between subjects? Because as I remembered, I saw in your article that you choose the individuals between IQ range in 74 and 148. And I think this is a very large range. And we know that the IQ and intelligence is very important things that can affect on learning.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let me first answer the first question. So yes, so the IQ, there's kind of a range, and we try to match them. So the range of the range of the IQ of ASD, so the IQ range of this line is smaller than the IQ range of ASD. So in ASD, the IQ is a little bit more variant. And what we did is like in the supplementary analysis, we tried to like subsample from the ASD group such that the IQ, the range is equivalent between ASD and TB. So we had like fewer ASD individuals such that their IQ range is more or less the same as the IQ range from the healthy participants. And we did all of our analysis using these comparable groups, and then it didn't change much. And because this is subsampling, right, we could also do different subgroups where the IQ range are identical or comparable. And we did like a few versions of subsampling, and then in all of these subsamplings, their data doesn't really change much from our main behavioral analysis.
Yes, thank you, I understand. And my second question is that, do you think if we change the feedback in our task, there would be a change in the result? Because you told that you saw less feedback sensitivity in ASD, especially in children. And I think this feedback smiley face is not very interesting for children. And if we change the feedback and more interesting and more incentives is maybe we can change in the result. Do you think we can change this result or not?
Yeah. So there was kind of a pre-testing phase. I'm not sure if they really did it because I was not really involved in the data collection, but I vaguely remember that there was a pre-testing phase such that the experimenters, they really tried very hard to make sure that what they preferred in terms of the feedback. So before the learning task, just show them the smiley happy face and the sad face, basically to let them decide which one they prefer, right? So I guess mostly they prefer like the happy face, and they try to avoid the sad face. So there's also a color. So the happy face is always with green color, and then the sad face is always with a red color. So mostly they try to picked the green happy smiley and avoided the red angry or sad smiley. And when they understand that, and it's easier like to carry out the main learning task. It might change the result if we use different types of feedback, but I really am not sure. So I mean, as long as they understand what they preferred, what they didn't, and then that might not change much, perhaps. Yeah.
Okay, many thanks.
Thank you.
Amin, I think you have one question.
Yes, thank you so much for your presentation. I have a question. Please go to page 28. About optimal learning rate. There is a curve about the how to. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yes. I think that is the interesting result, and I try to use this finding. I have a question. How did you calculate and find the optimal this optimal point? This is the related to the real data or a simulation? How did you calculate it?
Yeah, this is from simulation. So right. We have this task, right? So here there's a reversal and this 80 trials, and we take every single, well, this is continuous. We didn't really take every single, but let's say, so 0.01, 0.02, 0.03, right? So we put all of this learning rate. Let's say currently the learning rate is 0.01. And then we use the learning rate of 0.01 and we implement it. What we applied was plug in the learning rate of 0.01 and into the counterfactual learning model. And then we ask the model to generate fake choices for this task. And we then analyze the accuracy of the simulated choice. And then not so surprisingly, because this is close to 0, right? This is 0.5 accuracy, right? And then we did this throughout the range until 1. And then here, this is how the curve is plotted.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I have another question. As you probably know, in the previous work in the perceptual decision-making task, researchers shows that all autisms are conservative. So in the drift diffusion model, they have a larger and wider boundary related to the DDM. I have a hypothesis related to your result. Is it maybe this kind of wider and larger boundary for autism is not optimal? Because in the comparison with the normal group, they have a larger wider. Could we have this kind of analysis in that concept to show that, okay, this winder is not optimal?
Yeah, so this using the diffusion model, then that requires the response time data, right? So because of the previous comment question, we didn't really instruct the participants to press as fast as possible. So then analyzing the RT data might not make so much sense, even though we could, but I'm not entirely sure what the result will come out. Okay. So if then in the next study, then let's say, well, using adolescents and adults, we just have to instruct them like press as fast as possible, and then the RT data can be meaningful. And in that case, so that data is more valid and with better quality to implement DDM to see if there's a larger or smaller boundary.
Yes. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, here's one last question, I guess.
Yeah, we have another question. Khater, please.
Thank you for your nice talk, Clay. So my question concerns the implication of these results. So imagine that you're supposed to produce a new method for improving the flexibility in individuals with autism, what would that implication or that intervention would be for different people with autism and in different ages? Would it? I assume it would be different for children than for adults and adolescents. And
yeah. So it's quite important. I think across all of these age groups, what we can do is like, so here the reversal happens without being announced, right? So they didn't know there's a reversal. They have to find out. But let's say in some reality, if we try to improve the behavior of autistic individuals, so what about just tell them if there's a change instead of letting them find out by themselves? So if they try to find out by themselves, they might take longer, they might get stuck, and they didn't know what to do. They didn't really know how to flexibly switch to maybe a new strategy. But what if we have an instructed version? It's more like in the machine learning theory, there's like supervised learning, right? What about like supervise or gives them the appropriate informative feedback such that they don't have to waste quite a large amount of time like stacking with old strategies. So this is what my take at least, but I'm happy to hear about others' opinion or your opinion.
Sorry, do you think that this works for all ages?
That could be, yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, Lei, many thanks again for everything. I really appreciate it. I think we can finish the meeting.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a nice day. Bye.
You too, bye.